On a warm Tuesday evening in October 2024, at exactly 8:47 p.m., a scream pierced the quiet streets of Fairhope, Alabama. It came from the Patterson home, a beautiful colonial framed by ancient oaks, the kind of place neighbors pointed to and said, "They've got the dream." Inside lived Thomas Patterson, a respected attorney, his elegant wife Diane, and their bright 20-year-old daughter, Maya, admired by everyone who knew her. But by midnight, that dream was dead. When Thomas returned home from the office, he found his wife lying in a pool of blood, a shattered lamp beside the bed, and Maya upstairs, trembling, her shoes stained with something dark red. Police thought it was a break-in, but there was no forced entry, no theft. This wasn't random. It was personal. A forbidden affair. A betrayal no family could survive. Because when a mother steals her daughter's boyfriend, when jealousy becomes obsession and love turns lethal, someone always pays the price. This is True Crimes Alter, where love turns deadly, family secrets unravel, and the truth bleeds through the lies. If you're drawn to haunting true crime stories told with raw emotion and gripping suspense, subscribe now, share this video, and tell us what you think in the comments below. The Patterson home stood at the edge of a quiet Alabama town, wrapped in the embrace of towering oaks whose limbs seemed to guard it from the world beyond. For years, the house had been a portrait of Southern serenity, a successful husband, a graceful wife, a bright daughter preparing for her future. To everyone who knew them, the Pattersons were the picture of happiness. Thomas was buried in his work as an attorney, often staying late at the office. Diane managed the household with calm efficiency, admired for her charm and composure. And Maya, devoted to her parents, was thoughtful and reserved, with deep brown eyes that reflected her mother's warmth. They looked perfect. But perfection hides cracks. And in this house, the first crack appeared when Maya brought home her new boyfriend. His name was Devin. He was 21, confident, magnetic, the kind of young man who made people turn their heads when he entered a room. He studied at the same college as Maya, and from the moment he walked into the Patterson home, something shifted. Diane noticed him instantly. He had a quiet boldness, a relaxed smile that disarmed everyone around him. He looked at her with an ease that made her heart skip. She brushed the thought aside. He was her daughter's boyfriend, but the feeling lingered. That evening, as he laughed with Maya over dinner, Diane caught herself studying his face. His laugh, his voice, the way he carried himself, it stirred something she hadn't felt in years. She tried to shake it off. It was harmless, she told herself. Yet when he looked up and met her eyes across the table, a strange current passed between them. From that night, something inside Diane began to change. At first, she pushed the thoughts away. She filled her days with errands, volunteer meetings, and phone calls with friends, but Devin's image kept returning. When he visited, she found herself dressing with more care, adding perfume she hadn't touched in years. She told herself it was silly, but she caught him looking too. A glance that lasted a beat too long. A smile that said more than words. Their interactions became charged in ways neither of them spoke about. A few weeks later, one quiet evening, that unspoken tension crossed a line. Thomas was working late at the firm. Maya had gone out to meet friends. Devin said he'd wait for her at the house. Diane poured him a glass of wine, telling herself it was nothing, just being polite. They sat across from each other in the living room, the low lamp casting soft light on his face. Conversation flowed easily. Music, college, family, life. Then it shifted. Devin spoke about his parents' recent separation, how he'd felt abandoned and adrift. Diane listened closely, touched by his vulnerability. She told him about Thomas's long absences, how quiet the house had become. Something unspoken connected them, loneliness, desire, the need to be seen. Devin's hand brushed hers. She froze, breath shallow, but didn't pull away. The moment was brief, fragile, dangerous. She rose suddenly, flustered, mumbling about clearing the glasses. He left soon after, and Diane stood alone in the kitchen, trembling. Nothing had happened, not really, but everything had. After that night, every look, every word between them carried weight. They met eyes too often. They lingered too long in conversation. The invisible boundary between them grew thinner each time. Diane knew it was wrong, but she couldn't help it. Devin seemed to awaken something she'd buried for years. He made her feel alive again. Weeks passed. Maya noticed her mother smiling more, humming while cooking, wearing lipstick for no reason. She didn't suspect why. But one afternoon, while Maya stayed late for classes, Devin stopped by the house. Diane knew she should send him away, but she didn't. He stood in the doorway, uncertain but drawn to her. Their eyes locked, and in that still moment Diane realized she'd already crossed the line in her heart. When he stepped closer, she didn't move. The first kiss was brief, hesitant, but once it happened, no could stop. It was reckless and intoxicating, and it changed everything. From then on, they found excuses to be alone. A quick visit when Maya was out, a message here and there, a secret look when he came for dinner. Diane told herself she could handle it, that no one would ever know. But desire has a way of growing wild when it's fed in the dark. She became distracted, anxious, short-tempered. Maya noticed but didn't understand. Devin, once affectionate and open, started acting distant around Maya. She asked what was wrong. He blamed stress. But Maya saw it in his eyes. His thoughts were elsewhere. Diane told herself to stop, to end it before it destroyed everything, but she couldn't. Devin had become an addiction, one she didn't want to quit. Each time they met, the guilt grew heavier, but so did the longing. By late September, Diane's careful composure began to crack. Her daughter sensed it. Her husband noticed her drifting away, but no one could imagine what was truly happening inside that perfect white house at the corner of Maple Lane. Maya began to notice the change first. Her mother, once cheerful and attentive, had become distracted and distant. Diane spent long hours alone in her room, emerging with a forced smile and claiming she was tired or had a headache. Maya tried to dismiss it, assuming her mother was stressed or perhaps lonely with her father always working late. But then she began to notice changes in Devin, too. He seemed nervous, withdrawn, like a man carrying a secret. Their once easy conversations had turned brief and strained. When they went out with friends, he was quieter than usual, glancing at his phone or lost in thought. One afternoon, sitting together at a small cafe near campus, Maya finally asked what was wrong. "Devin, you've changed," she said softly, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "You barely talk to me anymore. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. Just tired. Classes, work, everything's piling up." His answer sounded rehearsed. Maya wanted to believe him, but deep down she felt something was slipping away. Still, she didn't push. She loved him too much to risk driving him further. Meanwhile, neighbors began to notice that Diane was acting strange. Patricia, her closest friend, stopped by one afternoon to discuss an upcoming charity event. She found Diane distracted, staring out the window, barely listening. "You've been distant lately," Patricia said gently. "Is everything all right?" Diane blinked, startled, then forced a smile. "I'm fine, just tired. Thomas is never home, and Maya's growing up so fast. It's quiet around here." Patricia nodded, unconvinced. There was something haunted in Diane's eyes, something that didn't fit her words. But she didn't press further. If only she had. Because the walls of that beautiful home were beginning to close in. Maya's suspicions deepened. She started noticing the way Devin's gaze sometimes drifted toward her mother during dinner, how Diane would blush and quickly look away. At first, Maya thought she was imagining it, but the tension in the room was unmistakable, thick enough to taste. One evening, she came home earlier than planned and found Devin and Diane in the kitchen. They weren't touching, but they stood too close, their voices low, their expressions soft. Diane jumped slightly when Maya entered. "Oh, sweetheart," she said quickly, her tone too bright. "You're home early." Devin's face turned pale. "Yeah, just thought I'd wait for you," he muttered, avoiding her eyes. Maya forced a smile, but felt her heart twist. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. From that night, her trust began to crumble. She watched them closely, quietly, pretending nothing was different. But her mother's laughter when Devin was around now sounded nervous, her movements rehearsed. Devin started avoiding Maya's touch, pulling away with flimsy excuses. Days turned to weeks, and Maya's quiet observation became obsession. She began to question everything, every text, every glance, every absence. One afternoon, when she was home alone, Maya wandered into her mother's room. The space was immaculate as always, the scent of Diane's perfume hanging in the air. On the nightstand sat family photos, her parents smiling at their wedding, herself as a child between them. But something about the image of her mother now felt false, like a mask hiding something darker. Drawn by impulse, Maya opened the top drawer. Inside, beneath folded papers, she found a letter. The handwriting was unmistakable, Devin's. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. "Diane, I can't stop thinking about you. You're like oxygen to me. I can't wait to see you again. Please don't let anyone find out." Maya's breath caught. The words blurred through tears. The letter slipped from her hands and drifted to the floor. She stood frozen, her entire world collapsing in a single heartbeat. Her mother and her boyfriend. The betrayal was beyond comprehension. She pressed a hand to her mouth to keep from screaming. In that moment, everything she thought she knew about love, trust, and family shattered. Over the following days, Maya drifted through life like a ghost. She couldn't look at her mother without seeing the lie. She couldn't touch Devin without feeling disgust. Diane noticed her daughter's silence but misread it as moodiness. Devin tried to pretend nothing had changed, but guilt shadowed his every word. Their secret, once thrilling, now felt like a ticking bomb. Diane knew it couldn't last. Every time she looked at Maya, guilt burned through her. She wanted to end it, to stop seeing Devin, but she couldn't let go. He had become her escape, her reminder that she was still desired, still alive. But desire had turned into dependency, and dependency into obsession. One evening in early October, with Thomas working late again, Diane texted Devin to come over. She told herself it would be their last meeting, that she'd end it for good. Devin hesitated but came anyway. When he arrived, Diane greeted him quietly, her expression conflicted. They sat in the kitchen, speaking in low voices. "We can't keep doing this," Diane whispered. "It's wrong." Devin leaned closer, his voice low. "You don't mean that." "I do," she said, but her words trembled. When he touched her hand, her resolve melted. They kissed, long and desperate. Neither of them heard the sound of the front door. Maya had come home earlier than expected. She froze in the hallway when she heard voices, soft, intimate. Her heart began to hammer. Slowly, she stepped toward the kitchen and peered through the crack of the door. What she saw hollowed her out. Her mother and her boyfriend, their hands entwined, lost in each other. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. She backed away, silent, her vision blurring with rage and disbelief. Upstairs in her room, she sat on the bed, trembling. Every image of her mother's smile, every word of love from Devin replayed in her mind like a cruel joke. Her thoughts spiraled until the pain became unbearable. Something inside her snapped. Hours later, at exactly 8:47 p.m., that pain would erupt into a scream that would shatter Fairhope's quiet night. The quiet that followed that scream felt endless. By the time Thomas arrived home just before midnight, the house was still, its lights glowing faintly through the trees. He called out for Diane, but got no answer. When he reached their bedroom, he froze. Diane lay on the bed, her body motionless, blood pooled beneath her head. The lamp on the nightstand was broken, its cord tangled like a snake. For a moment, Thomas couldn't move. He dropped to his knees, his hands trembling as he tried to shake her awake, whispering her name. But she was gone. Upstairs, Maya sat on the floor of her room, silent, her hands stained, her mind blank. When the police arrived minutes later, summoned by Thomas's frantic 911 call, the scene was already cold. Nothing was out of place. No signs of forced entry. The jewelry boxes were untouched, the doors locked. Detective Raymond Clark stood in the doorway, his sharp gray eyes sweeping the room. "Not a burglary," he murmured. "Someone she knew." Beside him, young Detective Kyle Harrison scribbled notes, his face pale. "Murder of passion?" he asked quietly. Raymond nodded. Too clean for a stranger. Thomas was questioned first, his voice shaking as he tried to explain. "I worked late," he said, his hands buried in his hair. "I came home around midnight. Maya was upstairs asleep. I found Diane like this." Raymond studied him carefully. The man looked devastated, but something about his detachment made the detective uneasy. "You didn't hear anything unusual? No voices? No movement?" "Nothing," Thomas whispered. "I thought the house was empty." Next came Maya. She looked hollow, her eyes rimmed with red. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "I didn't hear anything either. I was asleep until my dad came home." Raymond watched her as she spoke, too composed, too rehearsed. But grief could make anyone act strangely. Still, something in her eyes unsettled him. A day later, while examining Diane's bedroom again, Raymond found a clue everyone else had missed. On the shelf near the bed stood a pair of shoes, slightly misaligned, odd for a woman as meticulous as Diane. He picked them up and saw faint reddish stains on the heels, white but not gone. "Blood," he muttered. Someone had stepped in it after the attack. And not just anyone, someone who knew exactly where to walk. Later that day, another clue surfaced, a letter found in Diane's drawer. "Diane, I can't stop thinking about you. You're like oxygen to me. I hope no one finds out." The handwriting was young, confident. It wasn't her husband's. When Raymond showed the letter to Thomas, his face went pale. "I don't know who wrote that," he said. "I didn't know she was seeing anyone." The discovery changed everything. The investigation turned toward Diane's secret life and whoever the lover might be. Among the names that surfaced was Devin, Maya's boyfriend, who had spent a great deal of time at the Patterson home. When detectives brought him in, he was nervous, fidgeting, his voice uncertain. "Yes, I knew her," he admitted. "She was kind, like a second mother." "You ever write her letters?" Raymond asked. Devin hesitated. "No. Ever visit the house when Maya wasn't home?" "Sometimes. She'd ask me to wait for her." Raymond leaned forward. "And did you?" Devin's eyes darted away. "Sometimes." He didn't deny it outright. The detectives exchanged glances. It wasn't proof, but it was close. Still, there wasn't enough to charge him. The case stalled for several days. Then Raymond decided to talk to Maya again. She arrived at the station in a pale blue sweater, her hair tied back neatly. Her face was calm, almost too calm. "Maya," Raymond began gently, "we know your mother was seeing someone. Do you know who it was?" Maya's eyes widened, but her voice stayed even. "No, I had no idea." "You sure about that?" he asked. "Because you seemed tense when we first spoke." She hesitated. "We weren't close lately. She was different." Raymond slid a photograph across the table, her shoes the faint stains on their heels. "Are these yours?" he asked. Maya stared at them, color draining from her face. I don't know," she stammered. "They might be. But I didn't. You were in that room after it happened," Raymond said softly. "You stepped in the blood. You tried to wipe it off. You've been lying to us, Maya. Why?" Her composure cracked. Her eyes filled with tears, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to," she whispered. I found out about them." Raymond waited. "About who?" "My mom," she said, her voice breaking. "And Devin." The words hung in the air, heavy and raw. "I saw them together. I saw everything. I loved him, and she took him from me." Her shoulders shook as she cried. "I just wanted her to admit it. I went to her room that night to talk, but she wouldn't even look at me. She said I was too young to understand, that it wasn't what I thought." Maya's voice turned sharp, her grief giving way to anger. "She lied to me. I lost control. I didn't mean to hurt her." I just wanted her to stop. Her words came in sobs. She fell. I didn't mean to. Raymond leaned back, silent. He didn't need to press further. The truth was already spilling out. Later, in his report, he wrote, Maya Patterson confessed to the killing of her mother, Diane Patterson, citing emotional distress and betrayal as motive. When Raymond left the room, Kyle was waiting in the hall, stunned. So it was her? Raymond nodded slowly. She loved him. He loved her mother. Everything else followed. That's tragic, Kyle murmured. That's human, Raymond said quietly. The trial came months later. The courtroom was packed, the air heavy with curiosity and grief. Maya sat at the defense table, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The prosecution called it murder born of jealousy. The defense argued it was an impulsive act of rage, not premeditated. The jury agreed. She was convicted of manslaughter. When the sentence was read, Maya's sobs filled the room. Thomas sat behind her, broken, his world destroyed by the people he loved most. Devin never appeared in court. He dropped out of college, moved out of town, and vanished from public view. Those who knew him said he couldn't bear the guilt. He'd fallen in love with the wrong woman and lost them both. Thomas never recovered. The house on Maple Lane was sold within months, its windows dark, its garden overgrown. To the new owners, it was just another home. But the neighbors who remembered the scream that night still looked away when they passed by. For detectives Raymond Clark and Kyle Harrison, the case stayed with them long after the paperwork closed. It's always the little things, Raymond said one night as they left the station. The crooked shoes, the stain no one else saw. The truth hides in the details. Kyle nodded, his face thoughtful. And people hide behind love. Raymond looked toward the dark horizon, his voice low. Until love decides to kill.